Welcome to another episode of On Patrol with the Suffolk County PBA. I'm CJ Hutter, the treasurer of the PBA.
I'm Tanner Brandemar, the sergeant-at-arms of the PBA.
And today we're excited to have Jason Richberg on with us. Jason is one of the Suffolk County legislators. He represents the 15th legislative district, which covers areas in Wyandanch, Babylon area. And, he's one of the strong voices there. He's taken on a leadership role. And, thanks for joining us, Jason.
Thank you for this opportunity. And I also have a little bit of town of Huntington. So I go Melville down all the way to
Gets a little bit of it.
Yeah, awesome. So, Jason, for everybody out there watching, maybe not everybody knows who you are yet. What kind of led you into the world of politics? What got you involved with your community?
So I went back, 20-some odd years ago. I ended up going back to school, and I've got an opportunity to go to Wilberforce University. And one of my early mentors there was Marshall Mitchell, who was the vice president of institutional advancement. And I ended up getting an internship or a work study program in his office. And he only had about 4 slots. There's a whole longer story about how I got it, but the long story short is I got there. And he said, one of the jobs I always wanted was to be a chief of staff to an elected official. He was a former chief of staff to a congressman, and the congressman was actually Floyd Flake, who was then the president of college. And so he said, listen, these are things you need to do. And he gave me assignments and missions, and not missions, but assignments and things, research how to do things. And then later on, he helped me find some internships. He helped me find some fellowships as well. And he said, if you keep doing these things, you'll learn what you need to do to go forward. And because of that, we were able to get funding years later, to do a Get Out the Vote campaign, an early vote campaign in Ohio in 2008, which was a purple state at the time. And we were able to get a majority of our campus and the campus across the street, 2 historically Black colleges, out to the polls in Greene County, Ohio.
That's great. And, we talk all the time about how important it is to embrace the youth and teach the next generation, how to operate and kind of keep the ships moving in the right direction. And it sounds like your mentor did that with you. And I know you've been a major part of some of the local youth organizations here in Suffolk County, even with your church. You're a Sunday school teacher. So it's great to see people that can be influential and be good mentors take that responsibility seriously and actually do the work.
Well, I think I've had a number of different mentors, whether it was in the church or in private life. One of my first bosses was my swim coach, who was a Russian immigrant who was a very strong personality, but he had a really strong love of teaching, but showing you how to be a boss, right? Mm-hmm. Like, what does it mean to be a boss? It's not about directing as so much as showing care, and in his own way. I'll just say, it wasn't, he was definitely from the old school coaching style. But it was tough love, but it was also, and I'll be honest with you, he fired me when I said, hey, I got offered this job, this opportunity to go to Wilberforce. He said, well, you're fired. I was like, well, what do you mean? I was like, I didn't even say if I'm going to take it or not. He said, no, it's better for you to not be here. And I don't want to be an impediment on your growth. And so if he didn't fire me,
you might never have gone.
I would not have gone. Probably would not have gone. I probably wouldn't be here today.
Wow, that's incredible. So, and that's great to hear that somebody was willing to maybe give up somebody that they saw a lot of potential in for their own selfish purposes to make sure you had the opportunity to do what was best for yourself. And, ultimately now you're doing what's great, some great work for your community.
And it's because, and so it doesn't matter who you are, right? You have the ability to instill some sort of something in someone else. Mm-hmm. And maybe you've done it already, maybe you haven't. But, I personally believe that that's part of the reason why we're here, right? We're not here. I mean, I love to win elections, but we're not here. We're here to make this world a better place and to uplift other people. And you can't do that by being focused on yourself. You got to figure out how you can help somebody else out, whether that's making sure, like with you, with the younger guys coming into the PBA, right? Hey, these are the rules. This is how you stay focused, right?
This is how the organization is going to continue to grow, by doing these type of things.
Exactly.
And I'm sure as you working in chief of staff for Dwayne Gregory, you got to see that a lot.
And it's funny because that goes back to one of my other professors in my first weeks of class. Me and one of my best friends, he would not let us speak for the next 3 years. And one of the things that happened, because we were answering all the questions, we were the show-offs in the class. And so, but working for Dwayne was great because I got to sit in those rooms and I got to live what I'd already understood, is that sometimes you get to sit in a room and be quiet. And because I was sitting in rooms and being quiet, I got to hear, one, what people were thinking, but also see how the county works, how government works, how people work, how government works with nonprofits and for-profit agencies. And it helped me become a better person and better understand what's going on here in county government.
I think that's really an I don't know, maybe underutilized is probably not the right word, but underappreciated skill of understanding when to be quiet, right? It takes a certain person and a certain mindset to be able to realize, you know what, maybe I'm not the smartest person in the room. Maybe I do have something to gain from these other people who have experiences I don't yet have. So it takes a lot to sometimes be there and be quiet, just listen, maybe not always jump to some sort of conclusion or jump to have your input and your voice heard, because maybe I have something to learn from these other people.
And so I had a priest who said, you have 2 ears and 1 mouth. It probably took me too long to figure that out. But, the 2 ears and 1 mouth, and you're supposed to listen listen twice as much as you speak.
Yeah.
And because then you're hearing how you can work with other people as well.
Right. And working with other people has definitely become one of your strengths. And I think that's a major reason why you've been given this leadership role within the legislature as the minority leader, because you have that ability to be able to, cross party lines, figure out what's best for the communities you represent, the county as a whole, and work with Republicans, work with conservatives, bring everybody together and come up with a game plan that benefits the constituents.
I think what's important in building bridges is that, we all have this myopic view saying, well, it's my way or the highway. Well, in reality, we were, first of all, sociology, you could talk about, we were built to work in groups. We weren't built to work on our own. That's one. But the second part is that, instead of being, stuck in our circle of what we think is working here, that's great, but how does that affect everyone? Because that might affect the folks in Mastic, but that won't help the folks in Smithtown, right? So how can we figure out, is there a middle ground that we can find where we can help other people? And how do we start those conversations? Sometimes we're all afraid to start those conversations because I don't want to look weak. Well, unfortunately, we have to take a step back and look at it from a grander point of view and then figure out how we can get things to move forward. And it doesn't matter if you're in the majority or the minority. The purpose is, how can we help Suffolk County residents? We're not, even though you're elected to represent your district, you're elected to represent the people of Suffolk County.
Right. And I think that's an important concept to keep in mind when, at every level of government, whether you're, a legislator representing a district or a town council person, right? You're represented to do what's best for everybody. You're elected to do what's best for everybody.
I like how you also identified immediately on this podcast how you have mentors and you credit those people for getting you where you are today. So I think that's a big part of where you are today, is that you've been able to identify that there's people that are willing to teach you and they have more wisdom than you'd have. I think that's important in the position that you're in.
Well, and so it's not just people who are older, right? People my age or people younger. So we have a youth caucus that we started when Dwayne was the legislator. And so that's been going on for about almost 15 years now, probably just a little bit more than 15 years. And, I've done other mentoring things, but sometimes listening to somebody else, whether they're younger or older, you might learn something, right? I can sit and watch a debate, whether it's the mayoral debate, and learn, all right, well, maybe I don't agree with what Curtis Silva is saying today, but I understand how he got there. And if I'm able to sit there and just listen more instead of just critiquing, and the same thing with, Zoran Mandani or Andrew Cuomo or any debate. I just saw the Virginia Attorney General debate was on. Listening to people and understanding how those ideas work, because maybe it's something I can adapt to, my leadership style, to how I work interpersonally with folks, And 3, maybe it's something that I can put in my toolbox to help my kids or the community later on.
Right. One of the things that I've noticed, especially during debates, no matter what office it's for, very often the candidates that are involved in the race recognize the same issues. It's their method or ideas of fixing those issues that's what's different. So I think a lot of people, we have so much more in common with what we view as the issues. It's just the process of how to fix them. And I think sometimes that gets drowned out by some of the national narratives we hear, some of the, national rhetoric where it's very divisive, because even throughout that divisiveness, most of the issues we all kind of agree are issues. It's just how are we going to fix it?
Well, I think there's 3 things there, right? So I think 1, when we start vilifying each other, you're closing the door to us working together, right? If I punched you in the face, you're not going to want to sit there, well, Jason, let's go have pizza. No, that's not going to happen. Right. And so we close the door to benefiting others by striking in anger, right? One of the things that, you learn from Gandhi or Martin Luther King or many other speakers is it's not just having the ability to speak. It's the ability to listen and then figure out how we can work together. Like the first part was being nonviolent, the second and speaking. The second part is then, all right, well, how can we work together? And when we, the whole conversation of turning the other cheek, well, that's because it was disrespectful, right? To slap somebody with one side of your hand as opposed to the other, right? So that doesn't mean you're nonviolent, but it also means that you need to figure out how we can bridge the gap together to work towards to a higher standard, as opposed to saying, well, that person's a jerk or that person's this or that person's that. We're not going to get anywhere. I mean, the perfect example is police reform.
Right. Oh, absolutely. I'm glad you brought that up because, I wanted to get to that eventually during this conversation. But you had, as a new legislator, and you had experience working with and around the legislature after working with Dwayne Gregory and as the legislative clerk. But as a new legislator, you took a leadership role in the police reform plan and what ultimately led to Suffolk County police officers getting body-worn cameras and some of the newer training that we ended up going through, as a result of the whole reform plan.
So I think, after the death of George Floyd, one of the things that I did was I just started reading. I mean, I guess the good thing about COVID is that you were able to shut down a lot of the outside noise and sort of figure out how we can get things done. And so I looked up the reconciliation hearings in South Africa. Like, all right, how did that work? What were the best parts of that? The Nuremberg trials, like what happened there? And realized that vilification doesn't work. In some cases, like if this is a criminal trial, that's one thing, but we're not trying to, adjudicate something here. We're trying to figure out how we can come forward. And so thinking that we needed to have, members of law enforcement, we needed to have community members, we needed to have parents, we needed to have an open forum for people to say, this is what I'm experiencing. And for a member of law enforcement to say, this is what you're experiencing, but this is what I experience at the same time. And not everybody, the Citizens Academy is a perfect example. Going through that, I understood, all right, this is what happens when you go on a police stop, right? This is the other side of it. Not to negate my background or fears or some of the interactions I've had, right? In this state and other states, right? Understanding that there is a misconception and we need to both sit down and everybody need to say, this is what we're feeling. Now, granted, there's points in time where people will come into those hearings and everybody's looking at each other like, all right, well, that's not what we're talking about here. People will talk about police stops, law enforcement officers will talk about their fears, and somebody's bringing up fireworks. Everybody looks at each other like, all right, that's an important issue, but we're talking about, health and safety and the like. But bringing folks together to have honest conversations is important for growth. That's how we grow as a people. Otherwise, we just we lose our democracy.
Right. And I think that's a perfect example of what we talk about all the time with maintaining open lines of communication, because on that on that committee, on that panel, you were on it, members of the community, but our former president, Noel DiGirolamo, was on it. So he was able to voice our concerns and make sure that our points of views were heard. And it came to a compromise of what best works and what best suits everybody so we could try to move Suffolk County forward in a positive direction.
And we're the only police reform that's still standing.
Right.
All the other ones. And that's because we worked collaboratively.
Right.
Can I ask something, Jason? Like during that whole process, was there anything that like really surprised you that police officers feel or deal with regularly when you're going through the whole police reform process?
I wouldn't say surprised, but I would say that the vulnerability of a police officer in some instances was important towards the conversation.
When you say vulnerability, do you mean like physical vulnerability, like the risk of danger, or the mental vulnerability? Both.
Because, right, when you're going through whatever, I can't necessarily give a great example, but let's say you're going through a door and you don't know what's on the other side of the door, right? To understand, and one of the things that happened is we had folks from both the police commissioner's office as well as labor union support there. And so they were able to walk through, this is what happens when we go through this situation. And to have have an officer or a former officer go through it. And I also called folks who I knew in law enforcement in Suffolk County and other localities. Hey, what does this mean? Right? Because then I was able to get it from multiple sources. Okay, that's what it feels like. Like I can't be there, but I can understand, right? In the moment, what's going on in your head, how you're trying to replay your training, how you're trying to replay the conversation. And this is what happens when this happens or that happens, right? And that's not to say that people can't understand it. It's hard to understand on either side, right? It's hard for me to explain to you what it feels like as a Black man to get pulled over by a police officer because you haven't been in that vulnerability, right? Mm-hmm. So, and some people say, well, but if you haven't done anything wrong, what's the issue? Yes. But I could tell you being pulled over in rural Ohio for going 31 in a 30, right? There's a different perspective, right? Mm-hmm. Seeing one of my friends get arrested for having a ticket that he couldn't get the tickets because he was in college, right? So, and then having to call his mother and say, hey, we have to figure out how to get this money to get him out of jail, right? And they were for parking tickets or speeding tickets. I don't remember what it was. It wasn't a violent offense. That's a different perspective. And so one of the things that really happened there, which is similar to the reconciliation in South Africa, is that you had people sharing those things. You had mothers coming and saying, this is what I felt like getting that call. Right. Mm-hmm. And then and then you had police officers saying the same thing. And so that vulnerability on both sides is important for us to go forward. Right.
So I'm glad you bring that up because the in the moment thought process of a police officer, when you don't know what's on the other side of that door, that risk, that danger, that thought in the back of your mind that I got to get home to my wife and kids, right? Because I don't know what threat's on the other side of the door. Is this a bad guy with a gun ready to shoot me? Is this a bad guy with a knife ready to stab me? Or is this a bad guy cowering in the corner and there's no active threat on the other side? You don't know.
Or is it somebody with a mental health issue who can't speak at that moment in time?
Right. You don't know. So I think the concept of trying to put yourself in the place of the police officers at that moment in time and not just Monday morning quarterbacking with information that you now know that he might not have known at that point in time. I think that's a very important piece to the puzzle that we kind of put together here in Suffolk County.
Well, and I think what else is important when the former administration was looking at the body cameras, mm-hmm. is to make sure you have the cameras that's similar to human eyesight.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And
right.
why that's
so
important.
It can try to give that perspective.
Because yes, we can have night vision, but unless one of you are superheroes that I don't know about, nobody has night vision.
Right.
So, and you don't walk around with night vision goggles in your car. And I don't know how much that would cost. So,
I'm sure it'd be expensive.
Very, very expensive, right? So how do we make sure that we're viewing things from the actual perspective? And I think one of the things that we found out is, one, DAs around the country liked body cameras because it's able to give more data to them, but also it helps us all see what's going on in the moment, whether it's right or wrong, right? We're able to see what's happening.
Right. And we had District Attorney Ray Tierney on recently, and we spoke a little bit about the value of the body cameras, and we've spoken to him on and off the air on how it does help his cases very often, and how the body cameras have helped show what the police officers are explaining, but sometimes maybe have a hard time explaining.
I like how he basically says, like, he'll hear a story from the cop or from a witness, and he'll be like, well, that's certainly, like, I don't think, maybe it was exaggerated a little bit, and then he'll look at the body cam, and it's like, no, they were completely right. That's crazy that just happened. I just saw that on video. I think
what you might have thought was an elaboration was actually an accurate description.
Yeah.
Well, and there's always, in a story, there's your side and my side and the truth, right? And the thing is, the body camera is the truth, right? It's what happened, right? It's not somebody retelling it. It's not, some Tom Cruise movie where you look at somebody's memory, right? It's actually what happened in the moment.
Right. And, to be clear, we do the best we can with keeping the body cameras on in a spot where it's similar to what a police officer might be looking at. But there are instances where
it's not on your forehead.
Right. It's not on your forehead. There are instances where my torso might be facing this way, but my head's this way. So I might see something that's off camera, just to be clear. But I think overall, the body cameras have been very good for Suffolk County. They've been very good for the police officers, because not just in the criminal cases and backing up, what we're saying is occurring, but also in, civil cases or even in civilian complaints, right? The body camera will help either back up the civilian complaint or back up the police officer's response. And that's not exactly how it came out.
Or, two people have, they're going through some sort of disagreement.
Right.
And they said, well, I said this. And then you go back to the recording. Yeah, that's not really what you said.
Right. There's a big difference. And it's great to be able to have that visual and the audio for those conversations to kind of help both sides, the truth come out, because the truth coming out is what's most important.
Right. And then making sure that the Suffolk County's residents are being, served, but also to make sure we have data to record the incident. Because the other thing is, everybody's got a camera, right? No matter where you are, we all have a camera, right? Good, bad, or indifferent. And so it's one thing to see something from the side that's obstructed. It's another thing to see it from the perspective of what's going on right there. It's like the Dave Chappelle episode where he had the stenographer on his back, right, to go through exactly what the conversation was he had with his wife. Right. Like, all right, most significant others would love to have a stenographer with them all the time. But, this is the way to say, all right, this is the audio, this is the visual, this is what happened.
It's funny you bring that. My wife and I have a great marriage, but, we bicker like any other couple does. And so I've actually brought that up to her. And I've said in the past, like, I wish there was a rewind button so you could rehear exactly what I said or rewatch exactly what I did. Because I'd swear up and down that I was right, and most of the time I probably am, but she'll be swearing that something opposite happened. Oh no, she'll watch this and she'll see these comments later, and we'll bicker about it.
There you
go. Yep.
But there's a recording, so.
Right? Exactly.
He's feeling the fire right now. I don't know if I like this. I don't have to be a part of it, but
so, but the cameras have been valuable to police. They've helped support criminal allegations, criminal charges, but they've also supported us when we're being wrongfully accused of something, which is great. And, like any good cop will always say, it will hold the bad cops accountable, right? We're union officials. We're here to make sure, our cops are afforded every right under their contract, under the Constitution of the United States, any Suffolk County charters. But at the same time, I don't want a crooked cop on my job. I want criminals to be behind bars.
I think our legislature and our command staff have done a great job of utilizing the cameras in the right way too. They're not like nitpicking at little small things. And I think that you kind of like, if there's an issue with an incident, you can take a look at it and say, okay, like that makes sense why that police officer took that action. So I think we're doing good in that fashion of using the cameras.
Yeah, 100%.
And the other thing is if it's ever a point where we can't make a decision, no matter what, the Attorney General's office can look at it, and they have their own folks who are in law enforcement or have been in law enforcement who look at the cameras as well, right? To say whether we did it right or did it wrong.
Right. Yeah. The Human Rights Commission came out of this reform plan as well. How much interaction do you have with that Human Rights Commission? Have you been getting active feedback throughout the reform plan since we signed it, or is it more of just annual reports that you look at? Like, how does that play out?
It's annual reports, but then there's there are folks who reach out to me and say, "Hey, this is where we're over here. Things are going well. This is the training we're doing." I think all of the new members of the Human Rights Commission have been trained so far in the internal affairs section. And I think, everything is moving as according to the plan. I mean, in anything, we always can do better. But I think one of the things we said is we're going to go through this and then figure out how we can make it better, or should we keep things, standard?
Do you like the way that's going right now, or?
From what I'm hearing, I think the folks in the Human Rights Commission are generally in favor of the way things are going. I think the tracking systems and the other things, I think part of the problem that we had with the tracking, especially in 22 and 23, was we had no servers, right? So we're still backdated on some of the data from the police stops and all the other stuff. But I think in general, that folks are in favor.
Okay. How often do you ever get to review any of these body cameras since you've been part of the reform plan? Do you review like some of the footage? Do you ever see any of these things, or is that more like just after internal affairs handles it?
So I can say that there was definitely one incident in my district where I saw the body camera footage. Actually, I saw that about 4 or 5 times where a gentleman lost his life. Or a gentleman passed away, I should say. And so and I'll just say the inspector in the first precinct, I spoke with folks in the administration, I think at the time. I want to say, it must have been last year. I spoke to then Deputy Commissioner Catalina and Deputy Commissioner Groneman, and they, sat me down. They reached out to the first precinct. I sat with Inspector Forte, and he showed me the body camera footage. I want to say 2 days later, a day later, or something like that. And then one of the things that also came out of the police reform is the civilian, the community police boards. And so some of those members saw the body camera footage as well. And I think that's important that, you had civilians in there, and some of them who were former law enforcement saw the videos. And it's hard. I will say it's very hard to see some of those things. And I did do a ride along years ago, and I probably should do another one. So some of the things that happen, especially on a Thursday, Friday, or a Saturday, in a police officer's day, is, can be very traumatic, which is why one of the things I'm a big advocate for is mental health. And, I can just say, seeing that body camera footage probably about 4 or 5 times was difficult.
Right.
I'm not going to go into the exact incident because I don't know if there's cases going on or whatnot. But
that's why I'm being very careful.
I can tell. Yeah. But do you feel like, as somebody that watched the video, like the before the video thought mindset and the after video mindset, how much different was your mindset in thinking of what happened, like how the police officer handled it? How did you feel before to then how did you feel after?
So I'll say that and I'm trying to be as careful as I can, not because I don't want to say, because I don't know what if there's
any current court proceedings.
Court proceedings. So I will say that, community members came to me with one situation or one interpretation of what happened. And not everybody saw it, right? So it's almost like sometimes somebody heard something from someone else, and so on and so on. And so when I got a call from the commissioner's office, I said, it's great. And they said they all saw the footage, and they said, everything went well. And I said, that's great. I'd like to see the footage, right? Not that I don't trust what anybody else is saying, but I can't represent something that I didn't see.
Right. You don't want to just be a third party knowledge when you're talking to your constituents about it.
I understand that.
Yeah.
And so I saw the footage, and I saw exactly what happened.
Right.
From the beginning to the end. And, I will say and I know the commissioner has brought up, some of the actions of the officers, trying to bring this person back to life. And, the amount of, let me take a step back. The last time I watched it with 2 former police officers, which is a completely different view than watching it by myself with Inspector Forte. And not that watching it with Inspector Forte was bad. They all were good in experiences, because I got to hear different things, right? And so these 2 former officers who I saw it with, they were trainers, right? So they were able to say, okay, I see this, I see that, I see it. And so then I can go back to police reform and say, oh yeah, that's what we talked about here.
Right,
that's what we talked about there. Okay, this is what's going on. And so I think it affirmed my thoughts on the trainings that we put in each time I saw it. The other thing I'll say is the gravity of the work that our county employees do every day was reinforced. And I'm going to be honest with you, I had difficulty with that. Not with what happened in terms of the work that the officers did, what I saw on camera, if that makes sense.
Okay, so I think one of
the gentleman passing away, right?
Right,
That's
the loss of a life.
Yeah,
this is real. This is not TV.
Yeah, it's not right. This isn't Law and Order. Right?
And it's not scripted. It's not what the police officers who were involved anticipated being involved with.
Right.
When their shift
and there was
started.
no weapons drawn. There was none of that. But it's just to watch it. It's one thing to know what's going to happen. It's like, I don't want to. It's one thing to know what happened in a movie, like to watch it. It's another thing to see it happen.
Right. And, one of the things we talk about often, and sometimes it's with DA Tierney, sometimes it's with some of the chiefs and commissioners, is the value of putting body camera footage out, sooner rather than later, before rhetoric begins and before, people start making assumptions about what may have happened. Get the real story out there as soon as possible. Maybe after a grand jury hearing, maybe after whatever the court proceeding has to be in order to get footage out, but get it out as soon as possible to avoid avoidable issues. If people have a better understanding of what happened rather than assuming the way something may have played out.
And I think there is a benefit to getting camera footage out ahead of time. From a county perspective, right, I can also say that I don't want somebody to try and doctor that footage either. Right. On either side.
Yep.
Right.
But I want to make sure that and one of the things that was looked at is how shareable is this data, one, for discovery, right? But 2, can other people see it? And one of the things that was great is the inspector was able to download that camera footage right away. And obviously we know the people from the commissioner's office saw it and the inspector saw it. And maybe that person's sergeant probably saw it before that. Right. And so that's what's also important, is that data is readily available for people to see once the necessary chains of of authorization are approved.
The original way that the video shows should be the way that everybody watches it. There should be no speeding things up and slowing things down. I think it kind of takes away from the transparency of the actual video. And I appreciate the fact that you sat there multiple times and watched that video. And as a person in your position as the minority leader and the leader of the community, that you can go back with what you saw and maybe put some of the rumors to rest on what other people might have thought.
And listen, people weren't necessarily happy with me about it. And I said, okay, that's fine. If you would like, if I know there's going to be another showing, not like but I know if you want to see it differently, that's fine. And I know the family has seen the video, and like I said, community members have seen the video as well. And the other thing I will say though, and I hear what you're saying about showing the camera footage out. I think the other thing is, we also have to be respectful of whoever is in the video as well, right? To make sure, right? Like, let's say, God forbid, something happened to a member of law enforcement. I wouldn't want that video out. Just like this gentleman who passed away in this video. I would want to make sure his family, their family are on both sides are okay with that coming out too. Because, in some cases, that could be the last image we see of that person. Right. And I don't necessarily want that to be the image that everybody sees of someone else's last day. Right. Or last minutes. Right. And whether it's a member of law enforcement or a member of the community, to me, the value is the same. Right. I want to make sure that everybody is, respected, especially in their last moments.
Yeah, that's a fair point too. These are real people. It's real lives. It's real families that are touched by these incidents. I think in some cases maybe it is valid enough to hold footage back, but I think in some cases too, maybe putting out the footage to maybe prevent some unneeded civil unrest, right?
And that's important too.
Right? There's a balance.
There's a balance there, and I think we need to just be understanding of how that is. And I will say that was one of the things that the commissioner and I spoke about in some of these things is that we want to make sure that people have dignity.
Right, 100%, 100%. So I think Suffolk County's been doing a good job at finding that balance. It is definitely an active conversation. We do talk, after a critical incident, very often about the value of getting footage out or holding footage back, depending on the court proceedings. So it is an active conversation on pretty much every critical
especially
incident.
if there's any type of litigation going on, we have to also be very, very careful because, sometimes people.
There's a lot of factors.
But we also need to make sure that we make sure we're being truthful to our residents, and also making sure that we're not letting folks run away with whatever fictionalized version of things happen.
Right.
Both sides. Yep.
Right. The truthful version. I think that's you put it perfectly. It's those open lines of communication. It's being able to listen sometimes more than speak and get to the bottom of what the truth is, try to find out what really happened, not just a version that might fit a narrative that some group wants to, push out.
I'd like to switch gears a little bit because I go back just the video for a second just and say how it was hard for you to watch. And I know you've been a big advocate for the mental health of our police officers, and we appreciate that. You've really brought that to the forefront of that. And I think that maybe watching an incident like that unfold has kind of maybe helped even more appreciate what our officers might go through on a mental health basis, on a day-to-day basis, going through calls like that.
I had a long conversation with my therapist right after.
And that's great of you to even be able to admit that openly, right?
But look, there are more and more men, and just in general, who have taken their own lives. And I know there's men we all know who have taken their lives. And for a variety of reasons, whether it's a diagnosis or something they couldn't handle or, family situations or just life, right? And I think it's important that we all are honest about, hey, look, we all need somebody to talk to. And the fact there used to be bowling leagues, there used to be all those groups outlets where we all where guys could get together and talk. And those we're less likely to do those things now. And so, yes, I'm going to say, listen, we all need to talk. right? I have a guys group who one of my friends, he makes sure every Monday, hey, what's the temperature check, right? So to make sure we have that. And I think making sure that all of our county employees have that ability to have someone to talk to, especially after a critical incident. And what is interesting is some of the things that, whether it's folks in our 911 call center or our deputy sheriffs or our police officers or even our emergency rescue personnel, you all deal with things that you all feel are normal, and they're not.
Right. You're absolutely right.
What you say is your 9 to 5 is not everybody else's 9 to 5, right? And yes, you signed up for it, right? You get paid. Okay, great. But to be on the other end of a line where someone is screaming for help, that's not a normal person's 9 to 5.
Right.
To show up when someone, is when someone is, trying to stab someone, right? Or someone's in mental health distress, or someone caught their significant other doing something and now they're reacting, right? That's not normal, right? So you're going from literally from 0 to 125 miles per hour, and then you got to just process that. And we're not necessarily built to process that, just like folks in the military. And I had a friend who was in the Marines, and he was in both theaters in the Middle East. And some of the things that he would just randomly say to me, waking up next to a landmine, that's not normal.
Right. That's crazy. That's
not normal. And I'm not making light of it, but he just sort of took it like normal. And I said, no, you need to go talk to someone. Like, that's not... Listen, you want to call me anytime, and I said it to him, you want to call and yell at me, and because you're cancer, no one, go ahead, call and yell. If I can't answer, I won't answer, but I'll text you right back and I'll figure out a time. And I said it to just about everyone. And obviously that's open to you guys too. But, there are people in this world who deal with things that are not normal, right? Even folks who are therapists, and we all need that outlet. And so we need to make sure that we're providing outlets and support for our members of law enforcement before events, after events, after events, and making sure that their families know, hey, Officer such and such was in this incident. Here are some resources if you see these things happening, right? Making sure that everybody is armed with mental health support, because maybe somebody's significant other doesn't know how to deal with that. And maybe they're coming home and they're just sitting there sulking, and they're not talking to their kids, and they're not being responsive. And they're, all of those things that are important to their daily life to even rebalance is tough. And I'll give you an example. And I know I'm on a monologue here, but, my sons and I, we do Legos, right? And I realized, and so they want to build a Lego city. One of my sons, he's got this huge idea of what he wants to do. And so, but I realized that, listen, just sitting with him and building these Lego cars or whatever, it works for me too.
Right. It's therapeutic.
And so, but understanding that we have to figure out what that outlet is. Some people it's fishing, some people it's but also making sure that you're adult enough to say, this is what I need, and I need help. And then if we make sure it's not, event-based, but just part of the culture, it makes it easier for all of us.
Yeah, I agree. And, it's been sort of stereotypical for police and military to put on this hard outer shell. You don't want to sound, you don't want to sound like you can't handle the stresses of the job mentally. But we got to break through that stigma, because there's a reason that military veterans are twice as likely to commit suicide than the general public. There's a reason why law enforcement officers are 60% more likely to commit suicide than the general public. The things that we see, the things we go through, the risks we take on a day-to-day basis, like you said, as much as we try to normalize it, it's really not normal for a human being to have to go through.
I have a cousin who is in law enforcement, not in this state, and he was a motorcycle cop. And I'll just say he was in 2 accidents. And I'll just say we are as different in body type, And I'll just say that, right? Okay, in terms of height and just like, and but I saw but he sent me the picture of the bike, and we text every now and then, once a month or once every couple of months. I was like, how are you? He's like, oh, I'm fine. Like, no, like you're not. Like, there's no way. And but you're right. Like, we need to make sure that there's support and there's family support.
Right. And I'm glad you bring up the family support too, because when we settled our last contract, our PBA collective bargaining agreement, that obviously goes through the legislature for review, and you guys ultimately vote on it. One of the things that were a part of that MOA was a joint committee between the county and the PBA to address mental health concerns. And you brought up during the legislative session, a recorded session, anybody could pull it up and watch it, the importance of not forgetting about the families of police officers when it comes to mental health. Because as hard as it is for a cop to say, go through a critical incident, a shooting, getting shot, right? And sometimes you're getting hurt. It's not just a bad guy that always gets hurt. It's just as hard for the spouse and the children to see that police officer go back to work. Because now that risk that you always knew was there and was always in the back of your mind, it just hit home and became super real.
I would just say that so my mother was in the towers in 1993.
Oh, wow. I never knew that.
And my father worked across from the towers in 2001. He wasn't there because it was a primary day, and so he did the Board of Election things. That was his one of the 10,000 ways he gave back. But I didn't remember that.
Okay.
And so now we can't get in touch with either one of them on 9/11, right? All the phone lines are stuck. And the fact that, my father had to go back in there at one point in time, they moved him. It was traumatic, right? I remember my mother being upset, right? And my mother couldn't actually come home that night. But so sending folks out after, when somebody comes home from a hospital, they're fine. And, now you're going back out. No, like the initial reaction of anybody was, no, I want you to stay home. I want you to be safe because I know you could be safe here. And I think it's important that's why we have to arm everyone. That's why, Legislator Baraga would always say when people leave the military, he would like them all to say everybody has PTSD, right? Because then it's a non-issue.
It's a normal issue.
But I think making sure that everybody has that support to know. That's why I said that. Hey, to, somebody's significant other, these are the resources you have, and maybe we should make sure we're calling that person. Hey, what's going on? How can we help? Here are the resources.
Encourage them to use the resources.
Yes, and make sure that when you have the barbecue and the meetings and the this and that there's a segment that has that conversation.
I think, yeah, we us cops, we have a heart out our shell a lot of times. We try to keep everything in, we suppress it. You're not really strong by keeping what's bothering you internally and not sharing it with other people. Because I'm sure there's a lot of people that are dealing with the same things that you're dealing with. They're just not expressing them, and they're waiting for someone like you to talk about it so they can talk about it.
And it also kills you.
Yeah.
Right.
The stress takes a toll on you.
It takes a huge. I mean, you metaphysically, you could probably look at it. Probably affects your back and your muscles and how you stand and all this other stuff. But how do we make sure that we all want to live longer, right? The goal of an officer is to come home at the end of every day. My goal is to make sure you live to be 90 to 100 years old, right? And that your significant other lives to be 90 to 100 years old. Because the reality is, first of all, men live less years than women, right? In general. So why? Because men bottle up all this anger, we bottle up all the stress, we don't communicate, we probably only yell at our football team, especially if you're a Jets fan.
It's bad.
Please. It's very bad. If you know somebody who's a quarterback, just let me know. We'll send them in tomorrow. But the most important thing is that we have to be able to make this part of our culture.
Yeah. So with your mom being in the World Trade Center during that first attack, What was that like as a child, knowing that, mommy was there? Like, because that's probably a big root cause of your feelings of the importance of making sure the families of police officers are taken care of.
So what's interesting is that as I'm replaying it, I didn't realize how important it was until later on.
Okay.
And then, my mother telling me about, and I just, my father worked for the federal government in the Inspector General's office. My mother worked for the Transit Authority. And so in 93, the Emergency Command Center for New York City was in the Twin Towers. Mm-hmm. So let's think about how logical that is. But I think later on, understanding like how close we were to danger, right? And to be fair, had things gone differently, I could have had no parents because my father was fighting multiple myeloma my whole life up until he passed away. Like it would go and it would be in remission and come back. And so there was a point in time and, there's probably some alternate place where my mother passes away and my father had passed away. Mm-hmm. And so realizing how close I was to losing both my parents, especially in that, early 90s, it's interesting to look back at it because you're right. It probably has formed some of my opinions about mental health.
Right. And, I've had the pleasure of meeting your mother at one of your fundraisers. She's a lovely woman, and she seems to be your mother and your sister seem to be your two biggest fans right now.
I don't know about my sister, but
well, I gotta tell you, she was definitely hyping you up when I met her.
Well, that's
she doesn't do it in front of him.
That's different. I will say that my sister, I'm very proud of my sister and her growth, and just the person that she's become. And she said, "Oh, you should do this. You could do this. You could do that." And she's got multiple degrees now. She's good. But she's a huge advocate. And my mother never stops. She's active in the church. She's active in this. She's fundraising for this group or that group. But I will say that I learned from my mother and my father, who both were active in the communities. My grandfather as well, who was a regional director for the Division of Human Rights for the state for a number of years. This is how we pay our dues on the earth. Right. Is giving back to others. My father was, coaching basketball, CYO basketball in Queens, and one of his former players was a former NBA coach. We'll talk about that off camera. But he also was doing taxes for free in libraries in Brooklyn on Saturdays, right? During tax season. Mm-hmm. My mother was, out doing whatever. My grandfather was, giving. My grandfather learned Spanish when he was 13, and he was helping communicate with communities, with the Hispanic community, and giving them law advice because some people were taking advantage of them, mm-hmm. right? And so I learned at a young age, one, you need to be involved in politics, and we need to talk about what's going on. I knew more about the pension system at 15 than most kids know, most adults know now. I had super respect for those in tier 1.
So do I.
Those people in tier 6, it's a different perspective, and we need tier 6.
Keep working on that.
We need tier 6 reform, and I'm definitely a proponent of that. But I think what's important, as I learned, that you have to give back. Like that dash, it's not about getting a street named after you. It's not about fulfilling any other perspective. It's more about making sure we're uplifting other people. And that's what I learned from my parents and my grandparents.
The betterment of everybody. And I have a great appreciation for how you talk about your family. I'm very close with my family. Like my mother plays a huge role in my life. I have a great appreciation for the foundational structure that they provide you and where you are today, and that you're giving back to the community and doing the same thing.
Now I just have to remember I have to call her every now and then. Otherwise,
I have the same problem. But Jason, we had a great conversation today. Thank you for joining us on the podcast. We love talking to you. We love seeing you. And we wish you the best. And thank you for all the support you give us and our members.
And thank you. Thank you for the work you're doing. And thank you for having this outlet. And more importantly, thank you for giving our local elected officials and political leaders an opportunity to come out and speak on our behalf.
Yeah. Thank you, Jason. We appreciate you.
No problem.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.